The backroads of Timsbury Canyon are almost always dead, but when they aren't, they're a constant danger zone to those who travel it. Not for the reasons you'd suspect though, seeing the canyon is nothing treacherous in terms of the road conditions. No, it's the rumors of what inhabits it at the late hours that make it dangerous. Before the night that I finally found legit evidence that Timsbury Canyon is far from dead at night, I had always been a massive skeptic, seeing some even labeled the canyon as being a hotspot for things like poltergeists, aliens, and even demons. I always found these claims hogwash, seeing I regularly drove that road to get home from work and never had seen any sort of unusual activity while driving the 20-minute route. Even on the darkest and rainiest nights when it was said for the paranormal activity to be the most active, there was nothing except me and the road. Then came the night that all of my suspicions went out the window, and when I had the most bizarre experience of my life. As usual, I'd been driving home like normal while listening to the local weather report, seeing there had been a massive storm earlier that day and mudslides were a common occurrence in the canyon after a nasty downpour. Luckily, the road had been clear of any obstructions, but I still wanted to be absolutely sure of any potential troubles. As I said before, the drive is about 20 minutes long, and I had been at the 19-minute mark up until I suddenly noticed something out of place. You'd think you'd see roadkill as a common thing in the canyon, right? Well, you'd be dead wrong, seeing there never is a sign of wildlife in Timsbury Canyon, and that's partially one reason the rumors even started. I can't lie though, because I had never even seen a single sign or sight of roadkill in my 10 plus years of driving through, but on that night, I saw something just off the side of the road that could have very well been a dead animal. I had slowed the car down and started a steady pace of 10 miles per hour toward the supposed roadkill, but upon getting closer, what I saw had made my stomach turn in horror. A young lady, likely no older than a little over 20, had been laying flat on her belly as still as a statue, dressed in nothing but a white crop top and light gray underwear. Now, I hadn't immediately assumed I'd discovered a dead body, but rather a setup for a trap. While the canyon isn't lively with wildlife, it most definitely is full of thieves, drug addicts, and much worse. Therefore, I immediately had held on getting out of my car to check, and instead had rolled down my window enough to call out to her in hopes of getting her to move or get up. "Hey, ma'am, are you okay?" I had waited a solid minute, but she hadn't moved a muscle. So either this thief was really good at controlling their muscles and movement, or it was the grim worst case scenario. I had called out again just to see if she'd move, but once again, nothing had happened. I knew I had to get out and check now, but if you think I was stupid enough to get out unarmed, you'd be wrong yet again. I always carry a weapon with me, the type being a standard 9mm pistol, and at that time, it had been under my driver's seat. Therefore, I had grabbed it and gotten slowly out of the car after making sure the pistol had been loaded and the safety was off. I had been prepared to start firing like a trigger-happy maniac at the first sign of any jump, but luckily, no such thing happened, and I had made my way to the still and unconscious girl. I had first felt her skin, and aside from the clear, cold feeling that had been caused by the temperatures that night, there had been no warmth to her whatsoever. I had doubled down immediately by checking for the ultimate determining factor, a pulse, and to my absolute horror, her heart had been silent and motionless. That discovery had not only immediately escalated the situation, but had completely taken me aback. I'd never been in a situation like that, so it had been jarring and absolutely petrifying. However, I knew that I had to address the situation, so I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. The call went as expected, explaining the situation, giving a description, telling them where I was, the whole 9 yards. However, one thing had bothered me the entire call, and that had been the fact that there was no clear cause of death. The girl had had no cuts, no bruises, no signs of a struggle, and there hadn't even been a single drop of blood anywhere. If not murder or worse, then how had she died? However, those thoughts suddenly went mute upon feeling a sudden icy touch and grip to my left shoulder. At first, I had assumed it to just have been the wind, up until I knew for sure that it was a hand. 4 separate ligaments had my shoulder in a tight hold, and as I had connected the dots, I felt my blood turn to ice. That grasp single-handedly had been the coldest contact to my body I'd ever felt, almost as if whatever had me in their hold had been made of ice. However, that had only been the start of my nightmare, the situation having escalated upon feeling hot breath against my ear and the tickle of hair against my left cheek. Their head was next to mine, but that had been nothing in comparison to what came next. I could feel every breath emitting from their mouth against my left cheek, as if the devil themselves had been right next to me, feeding off of my primal fear and desire to bolt back to the car. Then came the very thing that made the hair on my neck stand up.
Call it off. Now.
The voice had been feminine and authoritative, clearly hinting to me that, unless I listened, bad things were going to happen. In the midst of the terror that had taken over my body, the dispatch lady had been frequently calling out for my response as I just stood frozen, unable to move, think, or mutter a single word. It had been the worst kind of feeling imaginable, knowing you're pinned and have no idea what's coming next. I had been expecting to feel pain from a stab to my back or a slit to my throat, but nothing had happened up until the lady at my back spoke again.
If you don't call off the cops, I'll make you wish you had.
That had been a clear threat, so I somehow found a way to snap myself out of my state of mental paralysis, listened, and found a way to solve the issue without being delivered whatever my assailant had meant by, "I'll make you wish you had." Wait a minute. Oh no. Ma'am, you can call off the officers. I just found a tag on the body. So, it's actually just a discarded Halloween prop. My mistake.
Are you sure, sir?
Yeah. It even has the Party Empire logo on the tag. And they had to sell unrealistic props back in October. I sincerely apologize for the misconception. I had been able to tell she wasn't happy with me, but all I had cared about was following the commands of my assailant. Right then, all that mattered was doing whatever I had to do to stay alive. Period.
Sir, I advise you to check more thoroughly next time before calling 911. There could have been another real emergency happening right now, and you're calling over a Halloween decoration.
I'll be sure to double check next time. You have a good night, ma'am. I had hung up and dropped my phone to the ground.
Thank you. That saves us both trouble.
I had no clue what she had meant by that, and had no clue what was coming next. I had been expecting her to force me to the ground to restrain me, or for her to take my gun and lead me back to the car. But all that followed had been completely unexpected.
Now, go home and forget about this night.
She had released me from her grasp and shoved me back in the direction of my car, which had nearly made me lose my balance in the process. However, I had caught my footing and had been lost in confusion and bewilderment. Why had this lady spared me so easily? I had to see their face, so I turned back to look. However, what I saw made my jaw drop instantly, seeing it had been an impossible thing for me to even be witnessing. Before me, in full light and completely alive, had been the very girl I had discovered as dead as a corpse. I couldn't speak, and the more I had looked at her, the more the sight before me became even more impossible to exist. Her ears had been pointed like an elf or a fairy. Her eyes had been bloody red in color, demonic in nature, and staring straight into my soul. She also had a long, thin tail that sprouted from behind her lower back, and 2 long horns had grown from both sides of her head and erected from beneath her long pink hair. But the one thing I had spotted that clarified that I was in the presence of something otherworldly had been the mark on the side of her left leg. It looked like a brand or tattoo, but I knew for a fact it hadn't been either, as I just stood scared and bewildered that night. The only way I can explain how I knew is like a sixth sense, and as I had stood there before her that night, there had been a constant feeling of dread permeating from her. I also knew for a fact that when I had first seen her, none of the additional features that I had been seeing then were there the first time. She had no tail, no horns, no mark on her leg. It felt like time had slowed down as I had just awaited her next move, scared to death and drowning in a cold sweat. I still have no idea what had been before me nor their intentions, but despite their demonic nature, they didn't show any sign of doing anything malicious to me, only stood still with a blank expression on their face as if they had been lost or even scared too. What are you?
Nobody. Thank you for waking me up. It's cold tonight. Go home, forget you ever saw me, and have a good night.
She then turned and disappeared into the darkness of the night, never for me to see her again, and to this day, I haven't seen her since. Less to say, that was the last night I took that route through that canyon, not even wanting to know what else lingers there unknowingly. I had been fortunate enough to run into a harmless entity and would rather cut my losses than take any further chances on my life. What was she? Who was she? How did she end up how she did when I found her? Was she a ghost of a victim looking for help and guidance? Was she some kind of non-maleficent demon that had ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time? Was she even real? All questions I'll die with without knowing the truth.